They were the shining faces of country music, the voices we trusted, the heroes we admired. But behind the twang and the cowboy hats hid something much darker. From addictions that nearly destroyed them to secret lives that shattered their perfect image, these legends weren't the saints Nashville made them out to be. Today, we uncover the truth behind the myths, the 12 country legends who turned out to be nothing like we thought. One, Johnny Cash, the saint who walked through darkness. To the world, Johnny Cash was the man in black, a symbol of moral strength, a man who sang for the poor, the imprisoned, and the forgotten. His deep voice carried the weight of honesty and redemption, turning him into one of the most respected figures in country music. But behind that righteous image was a man tormented by demons far darker than his songs ever revealed. Cash's career began with fire. His early hits with Sun Records in the 1950s made him a rising star, alongside Elvis Presley and Jerry Lee Lewis. Fans saw him as the humble Southern boy who sang from the heart. Yet while his music preached faith and redemption, his private life spiraled out of control. Fame brought temptation, and Cash fell hard into amphetamines, barbiturates, and alcohol. He wrecked cars, missed shows, and destroyed hotel rooms. His addiction was so consuming that he once wandered into the wilderness and nearly died alone in a cave, convinced he was beyond saving. Behind the scenes, Cash's marriage to his first wife, Vivian Liberto, crumbled under the weight of his infidelity and drug-fueled chaos. He was arrested multiple times, once for smuggling pills across the border in his guitar case. His friends feared he wouldn't live to see 40. Yet somehow, in the depths of that darkness, his legend only grew. The public saw the sinner, but they also saw a man trying desperately to rise again. Then came June Carter, the woman who became his salvation and his mirror. Together, they built the myth of Johnny Cash as the redeemed outlaw, the preacher with a broken past. But even after finding love and faith, his inner turmoil never truly disappeared. His voice, that deep, trembling voice, carried every scar, every regret, every confession he couldn't speak. By the time he stood on stage at Folsom Prison, singing for men who'd lost their freedom, Cash wasn't just performing. He was confronting himself. The man who once fell apart was now singing to those still trapped in the same darkness he had barely escaped. Johnny Cash became a legend, not because he was pure, but because he was human. His story reminds us that even country's greatest heroes can hide shadows far deeper than the songs they sing. 2. Tammy Wynette, the queen who couldn't stand her own crown. To millions, Tammy Wynette was the voice of devotion, the woman who told the world to stand by your man. Her music embodied loyalty, heartbreak, and the quiet dignity of Southern womanhood. But behind the glamorous hair and sequined gowns was a woman living through the very pain she sang about, trapped in a cycle of love, abuse, and addiction that would ultimately destroy her. Born Virginia Wynette Pugh in Mississippi, Tammy's rise from a poor hairdresser to the first lady of country music was pure Nashville fairy tale. Her songs about heartbreak felt real because they were real. Every lyric about betrayal and survival came from the life she lived behind closed doors. While audiences saw a strong, devoted wife, Tammy was enduring something far different, a marriage marked by violence, infidelity, and control. Her most famous relationship, with country legend George Jones, was both romantic and catastrophic. Together, they became country's royal couple, but their love was soaked in alcohol and chaos. Jones's alcoholism and Tammy's dependence on painkillers turned their home into a battlefield. She was often left to perform alone, covering up bruises with makeup and smiles. After their divorce, Tammy's life spiraled further. Failed marriages, mounting health problems, and an ever-deepening addiction to prescription drugs. She collapsed on stage multiple times, underwent dozens of surgeries, and became reliant on pain medication just to perform. Friends said she was both fragile and fiercely private, hiding her pain behind her perfect Southern charm. Even in interviews, she seemed torn between pride and heartbreak, defending the very ideals that had ruined her life. By the time she passed away in 1998 at just 55, the legend of Tammy Wynette had become a tragic mirror of her art. Stand By Your Man wasn't just a song. It was a prison she could never escape. She built a career out of resilience, but she never found peace. Tammy's story isn't just about fame or failure. It's about how the myth of the perfect country woman consumed the woman herself. Her voice will forever echo with both strength and sorrow. a haunting reminder that even the brightest queens of country can live their lives in quiet, devastating pain. 3. George Jones, the voice of country, silenced by his own demons. When people talk about pure country music, they talk about George Jones. His voice could break hearts, mend them, and break them again, a sound soaked in truth, sorrow, and whiskey. But behind the microphone stood a man whose life was ruled by chaos. While fans worshipped him as the greatest singer to ever grace Nashville, those who knew him personally saw a man spiraling into self-destruction, unable to escape his own vices. George Jones grew up in Texas poverty, where music became both an escape and a curse. His early success in the 1950s turned him into a star, but fame magnified his weaknesses. Alcohol wasn't just a habit, it became his identity. His legendary nickname, No-Show Jones, came from hundreds of missed performances caused by drinking binges that lasted for days. Promoters dreaded booking him, knowing there was a good chance he wouldn't even show up. His marriage to Tammy Wynette was both a dream and a nightmare. To the public, they were country's golden couple, but behind closed doors, it was pure volatility. Fights turned violent. Their duets about love and loyalty masked a private hell of abuse, manipulation, and heartbreak. When Wynette finally left him, Jones collapsed completely. His drinking escalated into cocaine use, and his mental health deteriorated. At one point, he was so broke and lost that he famously rode a lawnmower 8 miles to buy alcohol because his wife had hidden the car keys. That single image, a country superstar crawling through rural roads on a mower just to get a drink, became the perfect metaphor for his downfall. And yet somehow, George Jones kept surviving. In the 1980s, after near-death experiences and failed interventions, he began clawing his way back. With the help of his fourth wife, Nancy, he sobered up, rebuilt his life, and reminded the world why his voice mattered. Songs like He Stopped Loving Her Today became proof that pain could still create beauty. But the scars never left him. Until his death in 2013, George Jones remained both a legend and a warning. A man whose gift and destruction were inseparable. His voice was his redemption, but his demons were always just behind the curtain. For Loretta Lynn, the coal miner's daughter who lived a silent storm mom. To the world, Loretta Lynn was the voice of the working-class woman, fierce, proud, and fearless. Her songs told the truth about love, betrayal, and survival in a man's world. She became an icon of female strength in country music, the coal miner's daughter who rose from poverty to the stage of the Grand Ole Opry. But behind her fiery lyrics and confident smile was a woman who endured a lifetime of private pain, trapped in a marriage that was anything but the fairy tale fans imagined. Loretta married Oliver Doolittle Lynn when she was just 15. He was nearly a decade older, charming, ambitious, and deeply flawed. As her fame grew, their relationship became a storm of love and violence. Loretta herself admitted that Do was both her greatest supporter and her biggest heartbreak. He cheated, drank heavily, and sometimes hit her, yet she never left him. Instead, she channeled the pain into her music, writing brutally honest songs like Don't Come Home A-Drinkin' and You Ain't Woman Enough. Fans saw those songs as empowerment anthems, but they were also cries from a woman living the life she sang about. Offstage, Loretta suffered miscarriages, exhaustion, and the impossible pressure of balancing motherhood, fame, and survival. She raised 6 children while recording hit after hit, often touring without rest. Her body broke down, but her spirit refused to. Despite the dysfunction, Loretta stayed with her husband until his death in 1996. She described him not as a monster, but as a man shaped by a hard life, someone she both loved and fought with to the end. Her story wasn't about weakness, it was about endurance. By the time she became the queen of country music, the world had no idea how much pain stood behind her crown. Every lyric she wrote carried the bruises, the forgiveness, and the relentless strength of a woman who refused to be silent. Loretta Lynn taught Nashville that truth sells, but her own truth was far harder to live. Beneath the legend of the coal miner's daughter was a survivor who paid the highest price for her authenticity. 5. Hank Williams Sr., the genius who burned too bright. Few figures in country music are as mythic as Hank Williams Sr. He was the poet of the South, the voice of heartache, and the man who gave country its soul. With songs like I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry and Your Cheatin' Heart, he captured the pain of a generation. To fans, he seemed to be the embodiment of raw honesty, a troubled but pure spirit who lived for the music. But behind the legend was a man consumed by loneliness, addiction, and self-destruction long before he became a star. Born in rural Alabama in 1923, Hank grew up in poverty and pain. A childhood spinal injury left him with lifelong agony, and that pain followed him like a curse. As his fame skyrocketed in the late 1940s, so did his dependency on alcohol and morphine. The pills dulled the pain, both physical and emotional. But they also began to control him. He'd show up drunk to performances, slur his words, and forget his lyrics. The audience saw a charming, reckless troubadour. The truth was a man slowly falling apart. His marriage to Audrey Williams was equally volatile, passionate but poisoned by jealousy, infidelity, and addiction. They fought constantly, often violently, and their relationship mirrored the turmoil that consumed his songs. Yet the worse his life became, the more his music flourished. Every heartbreak, every stumble, became another classic, another hit. But the fame that should have saved him only accelerated his collapse. By his late 20s, he was blacklisted by the Grand Ole Opry, homeless at times and battling unbearable pain. He was still writing masterpieces, but he was also dying. On New Year's Day, 1953, Hank Williams Sr. was found dead in the backseat of his Cadillac, his body surrounded by pills and whiskey bottles. He was only 29. His death immortalized him as country's first true martyr, a genius whose gift came at the price of his life. Fans wanted to believe he was a simple country boy with a golden heart, but Hank was something more tragic. A man who could turn agony into art, yet couldn't survive his own creation. To this day, every young country singer chasing authenticity walks in the shadow of Hank Williams Sr. 6. Waylon Jennings, the rebel who couldn't outrun himself. Waylon Jennings was everything Nashville wasn't: loud, defiant, and unapologetically real. He led the outlaw movement that redefined country music, breaking free from the industry's polished image to make songs that spoke for drifters, dreamers, and rebels. To fans, he was the ultimate free spirit, the man who stood for integrity and independence. But behind the outlaw myth was a man fighting a far darker enemy: himself. Born in Texas during the Great Depression, Waylon grew up poor but determined. Music became his escape, and by the 1960s, he was playing with Buddy Holly, touring America, and chasing his own fame. When the plane crash that killed Holly struck in 1959, Waylon was supposed to be on that flight, but he gave up his seat at the last minute. The guilt of that decision haunted him for the rest of his life. He often said that a part of him died that night, replaced by something restless and wild. As success came, so did the vices. Waylon became addicted to cocaine, spending as much as $1,500 a day on the drug during his peak. He barely slept, stayed awake for days in paranoid bursts of energy, and alienated nearly everyone close to him. His weight dropped, his finances collapsed, and his relationships disintegrated under the pressure of addiction. He once said he was too high to care, too tired to stop. Yet on stage, he was invincible. His rugged voice and raw lyrics captured a new kind of country, one that rejected the fake smiles and rhinestone suits of Nashville. He sang about sin, struggle, and self-destruction because he was living it. His friendship with Willie Nelson and the creation of the outlaw identity saved him both artistically and personally, giving him a purpose when his life was teetering on the edge. By the 1980s, Waylon began to turn things around. He got clean, rebuilt his career, and found stability with his wife, Jessie Coulter. But the years of abuse had taken their toll. His body weakened, and diabetes eventually forced him off the road. When he died in 2002, the world mourned not just a musician, but a man who had fought and bled for authenticity. Waylon Jennings was more than an outlaw. He was proof that rebellion always comes at a cost. He defied Nashville. He defied expectations. But in the end, he couldn't completely escape the darkness that fueled his fire. 7. Merle Haggard, the convict who became country's conscience. Merle Haggard's story was one of redemption, or at least that's how the legend was told. He rose from a prison cell to the pinnacle of country music, transforming himself from an outlaw into a voice for the working class. To his fans, he was proof that anyone could change, that country's bad boy had found his way to the light. But the truth was far messier. Beneath the image of the repentant rebel was a man who never stopped wrestling with the ghosts of his past. Born in 1937 in a converted boxcar in Oildale, California, Haggard's childhood was steeped in poverty and grief. His father died when Merle was 9, and from then on he drifted, stealing cars, hopping freight trains, running from everything and everyone. His criminal record grew as fast as his talent. At 20, he was sentenced to San Quentin prison for burglary, sharing cells with men who had killed. It was behind those bars that Haggard found both fear and purpose. When Johnny Cash performed for the inmates, something inside him changed. He picked up a guitar, and when he finally walked out of prison in 1960, he vowed to never go back. But leaving the darkness behind was harder than he imagined. When fame came, it hit fast. Songs like Mama Tried and Sing Me Back Home turned his pain into poetry. America fell in love with the idea of Merle Haggard, the outlaw who turned saint. But in reality, Merle was still volatile, still unpredictable. He drank heavily, cheated on his wives, and often lashed out at those closest to him. His temper was as legendary as his voice. In the 1970s, his song Okie from Muskogee made him a patriotic hero, but Haggard later admitted that he never fully believed the message it preached. The world wanted him to be a flag-waving symbol of moral order, but he remained the same conflicted soul who'd once stared at the prison ceiling, wondering how he'd ended up there. By the time he mellowed in his later years, Merle had seen both heaven and hell. His music spoke for the broken, but it came from a man who never stopped breaking. Even at the height of his success, he carried the shame and rage of a lifetime spent running, not just from the law, but from himself. Merle Haggard didn't just sing about redemption. He spent his whole life chasing it, never quite catching up. 8. Tanya Tucker, the wild child who grew up too fast. Tanya Tucker was barely 13 when she became a star. Her voice was raw, bold, and full of life, far too mature for her age. With her breakout hit Delta Dawn, the world saw her as country's new prodigy, a little girl with a grown woman's soul. But the industry that adored her innocence also devoured it. By the time she was old enough to drive, Tanya Tucker had already lived through more fame, heartbreak, and scandal than most singers ever would. Raised in Texas, Tanya was thrust into the spotlight by a family desperate to escape poverty. Her father managed her career, pushing her into the glare of Nashville's machine. She was marketed as the perfect blend of youth and rebellion, a country sweetheart with an outlaw streak. Behind that glitter, though, was a child robbed of a normal life. Reporters followed her every move, judging her clothes, her love life, her mistakes. Nashville had made her a star, but it also made her a target. By her late teens, Tanya had already become tabloid gold. Her relationship with much older country legend Glenn Campbell became front-page scandal, a fiery, public romance filled with passion, jealousy, and drugs. Their fights were as famous as their love, and both careers nearly crumbled under the chaos. Tanya spiraled into addiction, using cocaine and alcohol to cope with pressure and loneliness. The rebel image that once thrilled fans now became a prison she couldn't escape. Throughout the 1980s, Tanya battled to stay relevant. She went from sold-out arenas to rehab clinics, from glossy magazine covers to whispered rumors about overdoses and breakdowns. Yet every time people wrote her off, she clawed her way back. Her albums, What's Your Mama's Name and Strong Enough to Bend, reminded the world that beneath the gossip was a voice with power and truth. Still, Tanya paid a high price for her fame. The industry that once celebrated her wildness later punished her for it. She became the cautionary tale of what happens when stardom comes too soon and costs too much. Today, Tanya Tucker stands as one of the few who survived that machine. Her scars are visible, her story messy, but her voice, aged, smoky, and fierce, tells the truth of a woman who walked through fire and refused to vanish. Tanya Tucker was never the angel Nashville wanted. She was real, and that's why she'll never be forgotten. 9. Garth Brooks, the perfect hero with a hidden storm. For millions of fans, Garth Brooks represented everything good about modern country music. Humble roots, family values, and an everyman charm that made him America's favorite cowboy. He wasn't just a singer, he was a symbol of wholesomeness, a man who brought country to stadiums without losing his heart. But beneath that carefully polished image lay a far more complicated reality, one defined by ego, control, and controversy that his fans were never meant to see. When Garth exploded onto the scene in the late 1980s, Nashville had never seen anything like him. His mix of rock energy and country sincerity revolutionized the genre. Songs like The Dance and Friends in Low Places turned him into a crossover phenomenon. He broke sales records, filled arenas, and became the best-selling solo artist in American history. But as his empire grew, so did his need to control everything around him. Bandmates, producers, and even his label whispered about his perfectionism and his temper. The man who sang about friendship and humility was, behind closed doors, one of Nashville's most demanding personalities. His personal life mirrored that duality. To the public, Garth was the devoted husband and father, the clean-cut star who went home to Oklahoma after every tour. But his marriage to Sandy Mall was crumbling under the weight of fame and long absences. Affairs and jealousy filled the tabloids, even as Garth's team worked to keep his image spotless. When he finally divorced in 2001 and later married fellow star Trisha Yearwood, many fans were stunned. The fairy tale had cracked, and the man who'd sung about loyalty was living a different story. Then came Chris Gaines, Garth's bizarre alter ego experiment in 1999. He donned a wig, eyeliner, and released an album under a fictional rock persona. The public was confused, critics mocked him, and fans questioned whether the down-to-earth cowboy had finally lost touch with reality. For the first time, his flawless reputation showed real cracks. In later years, Garth retreated from fame, only to return with massive comeback tours and a renewed focus on image management. He rebuilt the narrative, the humble superstar, the loving husband, the man of the people. But those who've worked with him still whisper that the line between the real Garth Brooks and the brand of Garth Brooks is nearly impossible to see. Garth's story isn't one of moral collapse. It's one of contradiction. He became everything country music wanted: a hero, a myth, a machine. But behind the smile, there's a man who spent decades trying to control the very legend he created. 10. Willie Nelson, the gentle rebel who lived by his own rules. To the world, Willie Nelson is country's eternal good guy, the mellow outlaw with the braided hair, soft smile, and voice that feels like a campfire on a cold night. He sings about peace, love, and freedom, and fans see him as a saintly drifter who found enlightenment through music and marijuana. But behind that image of the laid-back cowboy philosopher lies a man whose life has been anything but peaceful. Marked by chaos, betrayal, addiction, and a lifelong battle against his own choices. Born in Abbott, Texas, in 1933, Willie came from humble roots. He was raised by his grandparents and started writing songs before he turned 10. His early years in Nashville were filled with struggle, rejected by labels, broke, and living off gigs in smoky bars. But by the 1970s, Willie reinvented himself as the face of the outlaw country movement, breaking every rule Nashville tried to impose. His music was free, honest, and full of soul. What fans didn't see was the toll that freedom took. Willie's personal life was as wild as his tours. He's been married 4 times and fathered children with multiple women, often overlapping relationships and leaving heartbreak behind. One of his ex-wives once famously sewed him into a bedsheet and beat him with a broom after discovering his infidelity. Despite his gentle reputation, Willie was far from the saint his songs suggested. His love life was tangled, his finances reckless, and his lifestyle relentless. Then came the infamous tax scandal. In 1990, the IRS seized nearly everything he owned, claiming he owed over $16 million in back taxes. His ranches, homes, and possessions were auctioned off to pay the debt. Most stars would have crumbled, but Willie turned the humiliation into legend. He released an album titled The IRS Tapes, Who'll Buy My Memories, and used it to help repay his debt, one song at a time. Through it all, marijuana became both his medicine and his brand. It mellowed the chaos, even as it fueled the image of the weed-smoking guru of country. But the truth is more complex. Willie wasn't escaping life. He was surviving it. Behind every calm smile was a man who'd seen loss, betrayal, and ruin, and chose laughter instead of bitterness. Willie Nelson remains one of country's greatest contradictions. A man whose peace was hard-earned, whose sins were public, and whose heart, despite everything, never stopped beating to the rhythm of rebellion. 11. Shania Twain, the queen who lost everything and rose again. In the 1990s, Shania Twain wasn't just a star. She was a revolution. Her songs redefined country music, blending power, femininity, and pop glamour in a way that Nashville had never seen. With hits like Man, I Feel Like a Woman, and You're Still the One, she became the voice of confidence and empowerment. Fans saw her as untouchable, the picture of grace, beauty, and strength. But behind that dazzling smile and global success was a life filled with poverty, trauma, betrayal, and silence. Born Eileen Regina Edwards in rural Ontario, Canada, Shania grew up in extreme hardship. Her family often went hungry, and her stepfather, Jerry Twain, was physically and emotionally abusive. From a young age, she learned to perform in bars to help feed her siblings, all while hiding the bruises and fear at home. Music was her only escape, the one thing that gave her both purpose and control. When she finally broke into Nashville, her rise was meteoric. Her partnership, both creative and romantic, with producer Mutt Lange, turned her into a global sensation. Together, they crafted an image that blended country roots with pop appeal, making her the best-selling female artist in country history. But while the world celebrated her as the ultimate success story, her private world was falling apart. In 2008, Shania's life shattered when she discovered that Mutt Lange had been having an affair with her best friend. The betrayal was so devastating that she withdrew completely from the public eye. Her voice, once her power, also began to fail her. She developed Lyme disease, which damaged her vocal cords and made it nearly impossible to sing. For years, the woman who had once dominated the stage couldn't even speak properly, much less perform. Fans assumed she'd disappeared for good, another fallen star in Nashville's long list of tragedies. But Shania refused to let her story end in silence. After years of therapy, vocal training, and sheer determination, she returned, scarred but unbroken. Her 2017 album Now was both a rebirth and a confession, her way of taking back control of the narrative that fame had stolen. The world once thought Shania Twain was the woman who had it all. In truth, she was the woman who lost everything and still stood taller than before. Her story isn't one of perfection, but of survival. And in that, she became more legendary than ever. 12. Randy Travis, the angelic voice that fell into darkness. For years, Randy Travis was the golden boy of country music, clean-cut, soft-spoken, and blessed with a voice that sounded like pure faith. He sang about love, redemption, and the strength of belief, and audiences saw him as a rare kind of star, humble, moral, and immune to the scandals that plagued others in Nashville. But the truth behind that gentle smile was far from perfect. Randy Travis, the man who sang about salvation, would end up trapped in a spiral of heartbreak, addiction, and humiliation that nearly destroyed him. Born Randy Trawick in Marshville, North Carolina, he came from a strict religious household where discipline was law and music was his only escape. His deep voice and natural talent caught Nashville's attention in the 1980s, and his debut album Storms of Life turned him into a country phenomenon. Critics hailed him as the savior of traditional country, a man who brought honesty and purity back to a genre drowning in commercial gloss. But even as his career soared, his personal life began to unravel. Randy married his longtime manager, Lib Hatcher, a woman nearly 20 years his senior who had guided every step of his career. Their relationship was complicated, more business than love, filled with tension, control, and unspoken resentment. When it finally collapsed after 2 decades, Randy's emotional world crumbled too. The heartbreak sent him down a path that shocked everyone who thought they knew him. By the early 2010s, the once spotless star was drinking heavily, behaving erratically, and making headlines for all the wrong reasons. The most infamous moment came in 2012 when he was arrested naked by the side of a Texas road after crashing his car while intoxicated. The mugshot went viral. The man who had sung about grace and faith was suddenly the punchline of late-night jokes. Nashville was stunned, but fate wasn't done with him yet. Just a year later, Randy suffered a massive stroke that left him unable to speak or sing. Most assumed his career and his life were over. Yet even in silence, Randy fought back. Through years of grueling therapy, he learned to walk again, to smile again, and even to sing faintly once more. Randy Travis's story is no longer just about music. It's about fragility, redemption, and the brutal truth that even angels can fall. His voice, though scarred, remains one of the most haunting reminders that behind every pure note in country music, there often lies unbearable pain.